The wind arrives before memory. It moves across the steppe like a voice older than language, dragging cold over the grass, combing the earth flat until nothing stands tall for long. There are no walls here, no shelter except what can be carried, no promises except the promise that winter will return and test every living thing again. In this place, life begins small and stays small unless it learns to endure. Somewhere beneath that enormous sky, a child enters the world without ceremony. No palace greets him, no stone remembers his name. There is only breath fogging in the air and the distant sound of animals shifting in the dark. He is fragile in a land that does not forgive fragility. The steppe does not hate him, it simply does not notice him. That indifference is its cruelty. Hunger circles like a patient animal. Cold presses against skin and bone as if trying to erase the difference between body and landscape. The boy grows in that pressure. He learns early that warmth is borrowed, that safety is temporary, that a human life here is a flicker constantly threatened by wind. And yet he survives. Each morning he opens his eyes as a quiet rebellion against the silence that surrounds him. You can imagine him small against the horizon, a moving speck beneath an ocean of sky. There is a loneliness to that image, but also a strange freedom. No walls means no boundaries. No boundaries means the world is wide enough to swallow fear. Empires, though he cannot know it yet, sometimes begin in places like this. Not in marble halls, but in empty spaces where survival is an achievement and hunger sharpens the mind like a blade. In the absence of comfort, attention becomes precise. Every sound matters, every hoofbeat, every shifting cloud, every change in the wind carries information. The boy is educated by necessity. The steppe is his first teacher, and its lessons are simple: endure, adapt, move. Silence shapes him as much as hardship. There are long stretches where nothing happens except breathing and waiting. In those spaces, imagination grows. A child staring at an endless horizon learns to measure himself against infinity. The world does not bend to meet him, he must rise to meet it. Somewhere in that quiet arithmetic, a thought begins to form without words. To live here is to refuse disappearance. That refusal is the seed of power. Not power over others, not yet, but power over fear, over cold, over the slow erosion that claims those who cannot harden themselves against it. The wind whispers over the grass, and if you listen closely, it sounds almost like prophecy. One day this boy will not be small. One day the ground he walks will tremble beneath armies. One day, cities he has never seen will learn his name in terror and astonishment. But for now, he is simply a child trying to survive the night. The paradox is already present. The future conqueror curled against the cold. The architect of an empire learning how to keep his fingers from freezing. History often hides its beginnings in moments that look insignificant. A human life balancing on the edge of hunger does not resemble destiny. It resembles fragility. And yet destiny sometimes chooses precisely this shape. Survival becomes a rhythm. Wake, endure, sleep. Wake, endure, sleep. Each cycle hardens him. Each hardship becomes a brick in an invisible structure forming inside his chest. He does not call it ambition. He does not call it anything. It is simply the knowledge that to stop is to vanish. Around him, the steppe continues its indifferent breathing. Grass bends, snow falls. Animals die and are replaced. The world is vast and does not mourn the lost. To exist here is to accept that mercy is rare and that life is a negotiation conducted daily with forces that cannot be reasoned with. This is the soil from which empires grow, not wealth, not luxury, but the intimate familiarity with loss. A child who understands how easily everything can be taken becomes a child who clutches existence with ferocity. You can feel the tension building in him, the quiet gathering of will. He watches adults measure distance with their eyes and read weather in the color of the sky. He learns that movement is safety, that stillness invites danger. The steppe does not reward hesitation. It rewards decisiveness, speed, the courage to ride toward uncertainty because standing still guarantees decay. When night falls, the stars appear close enough to touch. They scatter across the darkness in numbers beyond counting, and under that ceiling of light, the boy listens to the breathing of his family, to the restless shifting of animals, to the wind threading through the seams of their shelter. He is surrounded by vulnerability. Every human here is temporary. Every structure can collapse. Every bond can be broken by hunger or fear, and yet they persist. That persistence is a quiet miracle repeated nightly across the grasslands. It teaches him that endurance is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply refuses to end. The landscape that tries to erase him is also the landscape that shapes him. The cold chisels excess away. Hunger clarifies desire. Distance expands his sense of possibility until the idea of borders feels artificial. A child raised without walls does not imagine the world in compartments. He imagines it as motion. The horizon is not a limit. It is an invitation. Somewhere beyond it, he senses, lies more of the same vastness, more trials, more chances to prove that he can continue. Survival becomes identity. Identity becomes momentum. And so the intimate story of a boy against the cold begins to widen. The camera of history pulls back, revealing not just a single life, but the ecology that produced it. This is a land where weakness disappears quietly, and strength is measured by the ability to continue when continuing seems irrational. It is a world where compassion exists, but it is expensive, purchased with resources few can spare. The steppe raises its children in negotiation with scarcity. It teaches them to move lightly, to trust speed, to understand that ownership is temporary and only skill endures. The boy stands within that education, absorbing it without realizing he is being shaped into something rare. He is not separate from the land. He is an extension of its logic. The same forces that flatten grass flatten hesitation. The same winds that scour the earth scour doubt. In time, the child who survives this landscape will carry its philosophy inside him. He will become motion given human form, hunger translated into strategy, endurance weaponized into history, but all of that is still invisible. For now, there is only a small figure beneath a vast sky, breathing in cold air, learning that to live here is to fight invisibility every day. The steppe is no longer scenery, it is instruction. It is pressure. It is the silent architect of a mind that will not accept limits. And as the boy grows, the environment tightens its hold on him, turning from backdrop to tutor, from tutor to adversary, from adversary to ally. In that relationship between human fragility and indifferent earth, a particular kind of strength is born. It is not gentle. It is not decorative. It is functional, stripped of illusion. The land does not care who he will become. It only demands that he become something capable of surviving it. The rest will follow. The land that raises him does not soften as he grows. It sharpens. Seasons arrive like verdicts. Summer burns the grass to a brittle whisper, and winter returns to test the memory of warmth. People here do not speak of conquering nature. They speak of outlasting it. Every migration is a calculation. Every camp is temporary. You carry your home the way a tortoise carries its shell, except your shell can be stolen, burned, or blown apart by wind. Permanence is a fantasy the steppe does not permit. In its place, it offers adaptation, and adaptation becomes culture. Children learn to ride before they understand the word for distance. They grip the backs of small horses and feel motion enter their bones. Movement is not travel, it is identity. A body that can ride far can live. A body that cannot becomes a burden. The boy absorbs this without resentment because no one around him imagines an alternative. Animals are wealth, but they are also lifelines. A dying herd is not a financial loss, it is a slow suffocation. You can see how closely survival is braided with vigilance. Eyes are always scanning the horizon. Ears are tuned to subtle changes in sound. Even laughter is edged with alertness. This is a culture built without walls, and that absence rewrites the mind. A walled people learn defense first. A people of open land learn motion. Their psychology stretches with the horizon. There is no illusion of safety. Safety is temporary and must be recreated every day. The tribes that share this space exist in a constant negotiation with one another, alliances as fragile as ice. Cooperation is practical, but suspicion is never far away. Resources move, and so do loyalties. In a world where scarcity is ordinary, trust is precious and therefore rare. Violence here is not theatrical. It is atmospheric. It exists the way storms exist, expected, feared, endured. No one romanticizes it. No one pretends it is noble. It is simply part of the climate of being human on this grass. Raids come like sudden weather. A camp wakes to smoke. Hooves pound, screams rise and are swallowed by the wind. By morning, survivors gather what remains and continue. Grief is carried, but it cannot halt movement. To stop is to invite the next disaster. And so the culture learns a particular resilience, a capacity to absorb loss without dissolving. The boy grows inside this emotional economy. He sees adults measure their words carefully, conserving energy the way they conserve food. He watches disputes flare and settle with brutal efficiency. Mercy exists, but it is weighed against survival. If compassion threatens the group, it becomes a luxury few can afford. This arithmetic does not make people heartless. It makes them precise. Every decision is filtered through a single question. Does this help us continue? If the answer is no, sentiment is set aside. The land enforces that discipline relentlessly. Raised without walls, the boy learns that the world is not divided into inside and outside. There is only exposure. Exposure to wind, to rivals, to hunger, to opportunity. He grows comfortable with uncertainty because certainty is a myth here. You cannot own the grass. You cannot command the sky. You can only move intelligently within them. That intelligence becomes instinct. It teaches patience when patience is required and speed when hesitation would kill. Over time, instinct begins to look like strategy. Tribal fragmentation deepens the lesson. No single authority governs the steppe. Power is local, personal, earned daily. Leaders hold their position not through symbols, but through usefulness. A chief who cannot protect or provide is quietly replaced by circumstance. The boy watches this and understands, long before he can articulate it, that legitimacy is fragile. It must be fed. It must be demonstrated again and again. Birth alone is not enough. In a land that respects endurance above lineage, reputation is currency, and it can evaporate overnight. You can feel how this environment produces a different kind of human being. Harshness is normalized. Children do not wait to be shielded. They learn to step around danger. Adults do not expect fairness. They expect fluctuation. The emotional palette is shaped by extremes. Fierce loyalty inside the group, fierce suspicion outside it. Bonds that survive here are intense because they are tested constantly. Brotherhood is not sentimental. It is a contract written in shared risk. To stand beside someone in a storm is to trust them with your life. That trust, once granted, is sacred. The boy absorbs the grammar of this world. He sees that weakness does not invite kindness. It invites disappearance. Those who cannot keep pace fall behind, and the steppe closes over them without ceremony. It is not cruelty, it is continuity. Life here does not pause to mourn every loss, because mourning cannot stop the wind. From this, he learns an early, uncomfortable clarity. Survival is a form of honesty. It strips away illusion. It asks only whether you can continue. Everything else is decoration. Yet within this severity, there is a strange beauty. Evenings arrive with a softness that feels earned. Fires glow low and steady. Stories move from mouth to mouth, carrying memory across generations that own nothing permanent except their voices. Under the stars, people remember who they are. They recount migrations, victories, betrayals, recoveries. The boy listens, and through those stories he inherits a map not of territory, but of identity. He learns that his people measure greatness not by comfort, but by endurance, not by monuments, but by the distance their names travel. The steppe becomes personal now. It is no longer an abstract force shaping a culture. It is a tutor leaning close to a single child. Every hardship he endures becomes a syllable in a private language of survival. Hunger is not just absence, it is instruction. It teaches him to calculate, to store, to anticipate. Cold is not just pain, it is a reminder that comfort is temporary and must be pursued actively. Even joy is sharpened by context. A full stomach, a warm fire, a safe night become profound luxuries. Gratitude here is intense because it is rare. Isolation begins to define him. The protective circle that should surround a child thins and fractures. The collapse of family protection is not a single moment, but a slow unraveling. Faces that once represented safety become distant or vanish entirely. He feels the sudden exposure like a wound. Social exile follows, and with it a silence deeper than the silence of the steppe. To be cut loose in a culture built on interdependence is to hover at the edge of non-existence. Hunger returns, not as an occasional visitor, but as a constant companion. You can imagine the nights stretching long and empty. The boy lies awake, listening to his own heartbeat, aware that there is no one between him and the dark. From this intimacy with vulnerability emerges a hard knowledge. Loyalty is conditional. The world does not guarantee shelter. Survival is earned daily, sometimes hourly. This realization fractures something inside him, a childhood belief in permanence. In its place grows a colder understanding, one that will later resemble strategy. If bonds can break, they must be rebuilt stronger. If protection can vanish, it must be engineered. Early violence enters his life not as spectacle but as necessity, twisted inward. Conflict inside the family becomes a mirror of the larger world. Lines are crossed that cannot be uncrossed. In that moment, the boy feels a moral seam tear. He steps through it because he believes he must. The cost is immediate and invisible. Something soft recedes. In its place stands a new figure, more deliberate, more guarded. This is the education of a survivor. The recognition that innocence is a luxury the steppe does not sustain. Capture comes like a closing fist. Hands seize him. Wood locks around his neck and shoulders, turning his own body into a prison. Humiliation burns hotter than pain. He is displayed as a warning, reduced to an object meant to absorb the fear of others. Days stretch. The sun rises and sets on the same helpless posture. In that enforced stillness, a transformation occurs. He studies his captors with the intensity of someone mapping a maze. He memorizes routines, weaknesses, the rhythm of distraction. Calculated thinking replaces panic. The mind becomes his only free territory, and he fortifies it. Escape is not just flight, it is rebirth. When the moment comes, it arrives with a violence that feels like truth. He moves, strikes, runs. Water closes over his body, cold and absolute. For a suspended instant he is nowhere, neither prisoner nor free, just a heartbeat beneath the surface of the world. When he rises, gasping into air, he is different. The boy who was captured dissolves. In his place stands someone sharpened by ordeal. Someone who understands that survival is not accidental. It is engineered through attention, patience, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. The first glimpses of leadership appear quietly. He gathers small alliances, not through birthright, but through usefulness. Others recognize in him a familiarity with danger that mirrors their own. They see that he does not flinch easily. They see that he shares what little he has. Fairness becomes a magnet in a culture exhausted by arbitrary power. People begin to orbit him, drawn by the promise of predictability. In a land where chaos is ordinary, a person who offers structure becomes valuable. The boy is no longer only reacting to the world. He is beginning to shape it, even if the shape is small. He experiments with trust the way a craftsman tests tools. He rewards loyalty visibly. He punishes betrayal with a clarity that leaves no ambiguity. Slowly, a pattern emerges around him. It resembles order. It resembles intention. The child who once curled against the cold now stands inside a circle of chosen companions, and in that circle, you can feel a new force gathering. Survival has evolved into ambition, not yet for empire, but for stability. And stability, on the steppe, is revolutionary. From those small circles of trust, a larger shape begins to form. You can feel it in the way people stand closer when he speaks, in the way arguments quiet not out of fear, but out of curiosity. He does not promise comfort, he promises direction. On a land where direction is often the difference between life and death, that promise carries weight. Alliances are forged first through necessity. A shared enemy compresses distance between strangers. A raid survived together becomes a memory stronger than blood. He understands this instinctively. He engineers proximity to danger and then distributes credit for surviving it. Merit becomes his quiet rebellion. In a culture long governed by lineage, he elevates skill. A rider who proves fast rides closer to him. A thinker who anticipates danger earns a place at his side. Birth loosens its grip. Ability tightens its claim. The effect is electric. Men who once assumed their lives would remain small feel a new door open. Opportunity becomes a currency more intoxicating than plunder. They follow him not only because he protects them, but because he expands them. Under his gaze, a shepherd can imagine himself a commander. That imagination is a powerful adhesive. It binds strangers into a future. Brotherhood deepens, but rivalry does not disappear. It sharpens. Around every rising figure gather those who wish to stand beside him and those who wish to replace him. He navigates this tension with a precision learned from hunger. He does not pretend rivalry can be erased. He channels it. Competition becomes fuel for discipline. To rise in his circle is to prove yourself again and again. Complacency is treated as a form of betrayal. The message is simple and relentless. We survive because we do not stop improving. In a land where stagnation equals death, this logic feels natural. The psychology of belonging takes hold. Men who once drifted between tribes feel anchored. They are no longer fragments, they are components of something coherent. Shared meals become rituals of identity. Shared victories become proof that the structure works. Even shared losses strengthen the fabric because they are absorbed collectively. No one falls alone. The group carries the wound and moves forward. In that motion, you can sense a new social architecture taking shape, one that values function over tradition, cohesion over pride. Warfare begins to change character under his influence. It ceases to be an eruption and becomes an instrument. Chaos is organized, signals are agreed upon, movements are practiced until they resemble choreography. Discipline emerges not from cruelty but from desperation refined into method. Every rider understands his position because confusion wastes lives. The battlefield becomes an extension of the steppe's lessons. Speed matters, clarity matters, hesitation kills. Under his direction, violence acquires structure. Structure amplifies power. Momentum builds. Small victories stack into reputation. Reputation travels faster than horses. Camps whisper his name before they see his banners. Some approach him seeking alliance, calculating that proximity to his order is safer than distance from it. Others resist, clinging to older hierarchies, older grievances. He absorbs both reactions with the same calm attention. Resistance is information. It reveals weaknesses in his design. He studies it, adapts, returns stronger. The audience watching this transformation can feel the acceleration. History, which once moved in scattered pulses across the steppe, begins to synchronize around a single rhythm. Power grows not from fear alone, though fear is present. It grows from the offering of a future. He paints it in practical colors: stability, reward, recognition. Join me, and your effort will matter. Please join me, and your children may inherit more than hunger. In a land accustomed to cyclical suffering, even a modest promise of continuity feels revolutionary. People do not follow abstractions. They follow the chance to step out of repetition. He gives them that chance, and in doing so, he becomes more than a leader. He becomes a direction. The scale widens almost imperceptibly at first. A camp becomes a confederation. A confederation becomes a force that stretches beyond familiar landmarks. Riders who once measured their world in days of travel now speak in weeks. The horizon, once a boundary, becomes a staging ground. You can feel the collective breath of a people preparing to move, not just for survival, but for expansion. The local leader dissolves into a continental presence. His decisions ripple outward, touching lives he will never see. The machinery of empire, though no one calls it that yet, begins to turn. When the horizon finally breaks, it does not shatter quietly. It explodes outward. Speed becomes his signature. Armies move like storms, appearing where maps insist they cannot. Distance collapses under relentless motion. Opponents who trust in walls discover that walls are only as strong as the time they can buy. Psychological warfare precedes the riders. Stories arrive before hoofbeats, tales of cities spared for submission and erased for defiance. Terror is not an accident. It is a language spoken deliberately, a message written in extremes. Surrender and live. Resist and vanish. The clarity is brutal, and it works. Cities transform into symbols. Each one represents a choice made visible. When gates open, he demonstrates restraint, reinforcing the logic of cooperation. When gates close, he demonstrates annihilation, reinforcing the cost of refusal. The pattern spreads faster than any army. Entire regions begin to negotiate with rumors. In that atmosphere, his empire expands not only through force, but through imagination. People defeat themselves preemptively, calculating that survival lies in alignment. He understands that fear, once systematized, is an engine more efficient than constant battle. Adaptation remains his hidden strength. He does not worship his own methods. He harvests the methods of others. Engineers captured become teachers. Technologies once foreign become extensions of his will. Siegecraft, logistics, communication, he absorbs them the way a body absorbs nutrients. His empire is not a rigid structure. It is a moving organism, evolving as it feeds. This flexibility confuses his enemies. They prepare for the last version of him and encounter the next. Each victory is not an endpoint, but a prototype. Expansion transcends culture and begins to resemble ideology. The message shifts from survival to inevitability. His followers ride with the conviction that history has tilted in their favor. That conviction is contagious. It turns ordinary men into instruments of something they perceive as destiny. The world beyond the steppe begins to realize that it is not witnessing a series of raids, but a transformation of scale. Borders blur, old powers stagger. A sense spreads that something irreversible is happening, that the map itself is being rewritten in real time. Awe mixes with dread. Observers cannot deny the brilliance of the system even as they recoil from its cost. To watch cities fall with such precision is to witness a terrifying efficiency. He has taken the lessons of a harsh land and amplified them until they encompass continents. Endurance becomes conquest. Hunger becomes momentum. The same logic that once kept a child alive against the cold now drives armies across deserts and mountains. The audience feels the paradox tighten. Admiration for the genius, horror at the consequence. Yet even storms exhaust themselves. After the explosion comes a quieter phase. The conqueror ages within the motion he created. His body carries the memory of every mile. Scars map his skin like a second geography. He cannot stop because stopping would unravel the structure that depends on his forward force. Expansion has become survival at a civilizational scale. If the empire pauses, rivals will test its edges. He understands this with the same clarity he once applied to hunger. To maintain life, he must continue moving, even as movement erodes him. The fear that enters now is subtler than battlefield danger. It is the fear of fragmentation. He has welded disparate peoples into a single machine, but machines require maintenance. He looks at his heirs and sees not just sons, but fault lines. He imagines the empire without his hand on its center and feels a cold deeper than any winter of his childhood. Loneliness grows in proportion to his power. Surrounded by thousands, he stands isolated by the knowledge that no one else fully comprehends the architecture he carries in his mind. The contrast becomes unbearable in its simplicity, an infinite empire balanced on a finite body. You can feel the weight pressing down. Every decision now echoes into a future he will not see. Legacy ceases to be abstract. It becomes urgent. What will remain when the rider dismounts for the last time? What parts of his creation are durable, and what parts are held together only by the force of his presence? These questions haunt the edges of his days. The storm pauses, not in the world, but inside him. What does it cost a human being to become a symbol larger than life? The answer is written in his posture, in the way he carries exhaustion like armor. He has traded anonymity for magnitude, traded simplicity for consequence. The boy who once fought the cold to remain visible now commands a presence that cannot be ignored. And yet the body that houses that presence continues its quiet decline. Muscles weaken, breath shortens. The machine he built runs faster than the heart that started it. Death approaches without spectacle. It arrives the way winter always arrived on the steppe, inevitable, impersonal. When it takes him, the motion does not stop. Armies continue. Orders travel. The empire inhales and exhales as if he were still there. The man dissolves into absence, but the consequences of his life remain dense in the air. Like a storm that has passed yet left the ground forever altered, he vanishes and reveals the landscape he created. What remains after a man disappears is not silence, it is echo. The empire he set in motion continues to vibrate long after his voice is gone, and that vibration travels farther than any rider ever could. Roads once considered dangerous begin to feel connected. Traders follow the wake of his conquests, carrying silk, metal, stories, disease, language. Routes that were once broken fragments align into arteries. The world inhales more deeply. Distant cities, unaware of one another for centuries, begin to share breath. Creation and destruction walk side by side, indistinguishable at a distance. You can trace the lines of exchange like veins across a body. Ideas ride the same paths as armies. A tool invented in one climate appears suddenly in another. A belief crosses a mountain range and finds new worshippers. Even fear becomes a courier, reminding people that they are no longer isolated. The paradox sharpens. An empire born in violence becomes a catalyst for connection. Trade flourishes under the shadow of terror. Markets rise in the spaces cleared by conquest. The map is stained and illuminated at the same time. Memory struggles to decide what to keep. Some remember him as catastrophe, a name whispered to explain ruins. Others remember him as architect, the force that forced a scattered world to acknowledge itself. Over time, myth grows around the figure because myth is easier to hold than contradiction. Civilizations reinterpret him to suit their own reflections. To some, he is a monster that justifies their survival. To others, he is a genius that validates ambition. The man dissolves into narrative, and narrative becomes a mirror for whoever is looking. Yet his shadow persists in ways too practical to ignore. Borders shift because he once moved them. Populations carry fragments of his lineage in their blood without knowing the story that delivered it there. Languages absorb words that traveled under his protection. The modern world, with its tangled networks of exchange, still rests partly on the scaffolding his empire assembled. You do not need to see his face to feel his influence. It is embedded in the expectation that distant places can touch, that movement is normal, that history is not confined to one horizon. Return now to the wind on the steppe. It has not changed. It still moves with the same indifferent patience, flattening grass, carrying cold. Somewhere a child is born into that sound, into that pressure. The land continues its education without memory of the student who once mastered its lessons. This is the final humility of history. The forces that create giants do not pause to admire them. They continue, shaping new lives, indifferent to the names attached to their work. The empire stands as a turning point, not because it was kind, but because it was connective. It forced proximity. It demonstrated that violence can paradoxically accelerate exchange, that the tearing down of barriers can create new corridors, even as it destroys old homes. This is not a justification. It is an observation that refuses comfort. Human progress is rarely clean. It advances through contradictions, through achievements stained with grief. To contemplate his legacy is to sit inside that discomfort and resist the urge to simplify. Memory and myth wrestle endlessly. The historical figure dissolves into legend, and legend into symbol. Each generation inherits a different version of him, sculpted by its own anxieties and desires. Some emphasize the cruelty to warn against power. Others emphasize the organization to celebrate discipline. The truth stretches between those poles, vast and unsettled. He was a human being operating at a scale that distorts ordinary judgment. To reduce him to hero or villain is to shrink the lesson he offers. His persistence in the modern imagination reveals something about us. We are fascinated by individuals who bend history because we sense, uncomfortably, that we live inside the consequences of their choices. The roads we travel, the cities we inherit, the fears we carry are not accidents. They are the sediment of decisions made long before we were born. He is one of those decisions given human form. To study him is to acknowledge that a single life can redirect millions, and yet the origin remains intimate. Every empire, no matter how vast, begins with a body trying to stay warm. A child balancing on the edge of hunger does not resemble destiny. He resembles need. That is the final circle of the story. The distance between vulnerability and magnitude is bridged not by magic, but by accumulation of hardship, of learning, of relentless motion. You can almost see the line stretching from the small figure beneath the sky to the shadow that later covered continents. It is a line drawn in endurance. The wind moves again. Grass bends and rises. The steppe does not remember names, but it remembers patterns. It continues to produce lives shaped by exposure, by scarcity, by the necessity of adaptation. Somewhere in that endless repetition lies the quiet truth that history is not separate from nature. It is an extension of it. Human ambition grows from the same soil as grass, fed by the same sun, tested by the same cold. The difference is scale, not substance. A single human life can redraw the map of the world. That fact is both inspiring and terrifying. It suggests that agency exists at the edge of survival, that choices made under pressure can ripple outward until they touch strangers centuries later. But the story also insists on humility. The boy who rose from hunger to command empires still returned to silence. His body dissolved into the same earth that tried to erase him at the beginning. Power did not exempt him from the final equality shared by all living things. What endures is not his breath, but the shape he left behind. We walk inside it without noticing. We trade across distances he helped normalize. We inherit a world already connected by the violence and brilliance of those who came before. To reflect on his life is to feel the weight of inheritance, to recognize that the present is layered over countless pasts that refuse to disappear completely. The story does not ask for admiration or condemnation. It asks for attention. It asks you to hold contradiction without flinching. Creation intertwined with ruin, genius paired with brutality, survival scaled into domination. In that tension lies a clearer picture of what human beings are capable of. Not just him, but us. The same instincts that carried a child through the cold still live inside modern bodies, translated into different arenas. We continue to negotiate with scarcity, with fear, with the desire to leave a mark. Listen to the wind one last time. It carries no judgment. It carries only motion. The boy from the steppe became a force large enough to alter civilizations, but the land that shaped him continues without ceremony. That continuity is the final perspective. History's giants rise and fall inside a world that does not pause. Their stories matter because they reveal how much a single will can compress into a lifetime. They humble us because they remind us that even the largest shadow is temporary. His life stretches between two silences, the silence before his birth and the silence after his death. In between, he filled the air with thunder. We live, in part, inside that thunder's echo. To understand it is not to celebrate or excuse, but to recognize the scale of human impact. The child who once fought the cold to remain visible succeeded beyond imagination. He did not merely survive. He inscribed himself onto the movement of continents, and still, the steppe breathes as it always has. Grass bends, snow falls. Another child opens his eyes to the wind. The cycle continues, indifferent and magnificent. Every empire begins with a fragile body learning how to endure the cold. Every legacy returns to the earth that made it possible. Between those points stretches the entire drama of history. Survival becoming ambition. Ambition becoming consequence. Consequence becoming memory.